This week's episode was brought to you by Alexa B, Kush Crunch, Akashic Spore, and Goat Flower 99. If you too would like to help us keep cranking out weird esoteric discussions at a weekly pace, head on over to www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where $5 will get you all our extended shows, bonus artwork, episodes, 2 unique, large, high-quality stickers sent to you, access to our cherished Discord server, where your based magic support network is spamming each other with gifts as we speak. Are you tired of the idiocy? Do you believe in the unfettered spirit of freedom but frustrated by the masses' inability to comprehend its nuance? How are we supposed to deal? The Founding Fathers, long since thrown under the bus, find their dusty words ignored on the borderlands of a new era, ruled by a desire to embrace a fresher, more robust form of liberalism. Torn in half by a sellout-hungry mob, hastening campaigns towards their own brand of tyranny, we are called to produce a vital current of philosophy, palatable to modern sense and true to the core principles of liberty. To this end, we turn to Jack Parson's Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword, one of the finest and most clearly written documents ever produced about the subject of liberalism. You haven't heard of him because he was written out of history, but my furry friends, now's your chance to check it all out. We don't have much time left, so thank you and enjoy the show. Tea is all you have sometimes in life. The big T. And you know what I mean by tea?
What?
Jesus.
I prefer coffee. I like me some bean juice.
Bean juice. I do too. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that. Or maybe we should.
Yeah.
Just keep it away from the microphone. That's all I ask.
No problem.
Hello everybody and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we don't just mix dangerous chemicals in the backyard with our friends and blow them up just to see what'll happen. No, we mix dangerous ideas from their purest, most refined sources, like Emerson and Jefferson and Thoreau. Put them in a cauldron, mix them together, and unleash them upon the world in a roaring bestial blaze of libertine glory. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, and today I'm joined by our illustrious, magnanimous, super wicked awesome co-host, Mari-sama.
Hello.
Brandish thy blade of freedom today and get out your eagles from their cages and smell some cheese on it.
American cheese.
Yes, that's important. You know why? Because it melts evenly with balance, spreading itself perfectly across the surface. It's practically a heat shield.
The reason is they put emulsifiers in it so all the molecules can get along and melt together.
And that's what makes the cheese American. And that's what we're talking about today.
Actually, I have a whole story about that, but...
About cheese?
About where American cheese comes from, but it has nothing to do with freedom.
The moon. It comes from the moon, Mari.
It doesn't. Remember government cheese? People used to get paid with cheese.
I'm only familiar with government chocolate, the subtle fudge. It's very sneaky chocolate. Following the Babylon working and an unfortunate relationship with L. Ron Hubbard, who absconded with Jack Parson's wife, fortune, and boats, his life would enter an early twilight. Due to old political affiliations, his security clearance and those of his colleagues hung in the balance. They hamstrung the seasoned chemist's ability to work in his field of expertise, explosives and rocketry. It was during these tumultuous times that Jack, isolated, endeavored deeper than ever into his conquest to know the divinely feminine manifestation of God that Thelemites personify as Babylon. Fortunately for us, he also produced perhaps his most poignant piece of work, Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword, the topic of our discussion today. Anyone who's interested in the life story and occult affiliations of Jack Parsons is encouraged to listen to our Jack Parsons series, which can be found in our older episodes from spring 2020.
Oh man, good times, good times.
Oh, very good times. I definitely did not blow myself up at that point. Now, unless you've been living under a rock since then, rather, this needs rephrasing. Since you've been living under a rock since then, now fully adapted to the hot, ear-pulling, pale flags of facile surrender, bent low by a new normal of isolation, ignorance, and frustration, those with ear to hear should hear. As we have gathered to discuss the words of Jack Parsons in the light of 2020, wearing myself, Luke Madrid, and the co-host, that's you, Mari-sama.
Sorry, yeah, it's me.
as an intellectual condom between thyself and the wisdom of Frater Balerion.
Excited to learn more about this Frater Balerion.
You really can't learn more than this. This is like his manifesto. This episode is addressed to all those indigested tummies, turned sour by the putrid soup of being spoon-fed to us by the Republicrats, the ones who desire some strong meat and rich white frosting on their hot, freshly baked apple muffin tops of freedom. Freedom with the American cheese we spoke of earlier, melted evenly across its precious supple surface. This, dear friends, is for those lonely souls whose necks have been stood upon, dicks yanked unfairly, punani's nullified needlessly, and just plain guys from Montana. So without further ado, let us begin.
And no step on Sneck.
Don't step on Sneck. Freedom is a Two-Edged Sword by Jack Parsons, at this time known as Frater Balerion. The inertia and acquiescence which allows the suspension of our liberties would once have been unthinkable. The present ignorance and indifference is appalling. The little that is worthwhile in our civilization and culture is made possible by the few who are capable of creative thinking and independent action, grudgingly assisted by the rest. Most people aren't really going to know. They're not really, they're going to give into inertia, they're going to acquiesce. And it's just gotten to this unthinkable point to the people that really love liberty. And so he's acknowledging the fact that liberty is made possible by the few who give a shit.
Or have the means to be able to follow their liberty. I think that's important to differentiate those things.
When the majority of men surrender their freedom, barbarism is near. But when the creative minority surrender it, the dark age has arrived. Even the word liberalism has now become a front for a new social form of Christian morality. Science, that was going to save the world back in the H.G. Wells time, is regimented, straitjacketed, and scared. Its universal language is diminished to one word: security. I need not add that freedom is dangerous, but it is hardly possible that we are all cowards. There's no real science or freedom without creativity, and if we bind everything to security, we're never going to get anywhere.
Everyone always has to follow the same rules regardless. If you don't allow for outliers basically are creative people or eccentric people. They're the ones that actually forge new ways of living and new sciences, new discovery. And I like that he even mentions that science, it's become almost like a dogma or a religion, because a lot of times, even when they commission scientists to do studies and such, usually there's already a wanted hypothesis before they even begin, and they get paid so much and sponsored by, large companies and pharmaceutical conglomerates that they end up coming to this conclusion that was wanted by the commissioner. Science, as we know it, is cherry-picked, and it's not necessarily like the whole truth. So we need creative people that are outside of that system to continue to do research.
Science is also part of intuition, or intuition is a big part of science. A lot of Einstein's work was related to the thought experiment and inspiration. You really need to initially choose a direction to start researching in the first place, and you have no starting point except intuition. That's
the natural way to go after science. Science is ever changing because you're always building on previous ideas and learning new things. These scientists are being paid to do these studies to give a certain result. I don't think Einstein was paid by someone to come up with that. I think that he just did it because he was a profound mathematician and really good physicist. So I don't think anyone paid him to come up with that.
Right, and it was an expression of his inspiration and his spirit. So we agree here. I don't know if anyone outside the show disagrees. If you do, don't say anything. For numberless centuries, society accepted the proposition that certain men were created to be slaves. Their natural function was to serve priests, kings, and nobles, men of substance and property, who were appointed slave masters by Almighty God. Against this doctrine, some 200 years ago, rose the most astonishing heresy the world has yet seen, the principle of liberalism. In essence, this principle stated that all men are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights, which belong to every man as his birthright. This idea appealed to certain intractable spirits, heretics, atheists, and revolutionaries, and has since made some headway in spite of the opposition of the majority of organized society.
This is the very thought that abolished slavery in the United States, which is very important to understand, that we're born with these rights.
Now, when I got to college, I took a class that said, we really need to downgrade these documents or reword them because they only include men.
Bullshit. Just think human. That's what I always did.
I have some sympathy for the other side, but I think we got to draw the line at dispensing with the spirit of the document. And even if the spirit of the document, see, they argue that in the minds of the men who wrote it, they weren't thinking of women. And so the entire thrust of the whole thing is compromised.
They used man because back then only men could vote, especially if you owned property, could you vote because you were paying taxes. Back then, they didn't tax regular wages. So anybody who owned property would be considered a citizen with a vote. So women couldn't vote back then. Minorities couldn't vote back then. It had to do with having fiscal liberty, having the means of freedom because you owned things. One thing I wanted to note is that, like, even the Bible was written differently, and then people argue, we should update the language so people can understand it. I would argue that actually dilutes the meaning, the original intended meaning. So what you should be doing is researching
the original context.
Apply it to yourself, because now women are citizens. We're full-fledged citizens with all of the rights of a citizen. So that man is referring to me as well.
So you're a man.
Even though I'm female. Yes, I'm a man. I'm a human. And a dog.
All right. And I respect that you're a dog. But why does human have to have the word man in it? How come man has to be the normative? See, I can do this all day. Maybe we should just move on. I like to play devil's advocate, even against myself.
Well, I'm also a whoa man. I mean, that's what a woman is, a modified term. Man is just short for human. So that's how I always look at it.
Is man with some extra.
Well, we got extra X. We got some extra chromosomes going on. So it doesn't really, the wording doesn't bother me. I think that's a shitty excuse to try and like rewrite a really old document. Because even when I'm studying the Bible, I have an older version that actually uses the original Greek and explains what it means. And then if you look at the newer Bibles that come out, it's all in like new English terms. And I really think it loses the actual intended meaning the more you translate it. It's kind of like playing a game of telephone.
We've talked about this on the show. Every Bible that's not the King James Bible is written by Satan.
No, that's not true.
As a slogan, however, it has become so popular that it is rendered unwilling lip service, he's talking about freedom, by all the major states. And yet it is still so distasteful to persons in authority that it is nowhere embodied as a fundamental law and is continually violated in letter and in spirit by every trick of bigotry and reaction. Further, absolutist and totalitarian groups of the most vicious nature use liberalism as a cloak under which they move to reestablish tyrannies and to extinguish the liberty of all who oppose them. Whew. Spitting hot fire, Jack. Ow. I burned myself reading that. Jeez. But the point I have here is freedom is often a hollow slogan used by its bitterest enemies.
When people use freedom as a way to take away your freedoms, it's kind of, I guess they use it as a psychological weapon, because it's not really freedom they're talking about. They're trying to funnel people into agreeing with their point, is what I think he's talking about. They can get the populace behind them. That's how fascism works. Yeah.
They come in with all these promises.
Yeah, and they pretty much demonize the other side or anybody who disagrees. So that's one way to spot someone who's tyrannical or any kind of totalitarian control. They'll constantly spout off about their enemy and how immoral and wrong and evil they are. And so what they're trying to do is get you to think that they're the opposing side wants to take your freedom away from you. So freedom can be used as like a carrot on a stick, basically to control the masses.
Right. So he goes in and says, freedom was best defined by Voltaire, Paine, Washington, Jefferson, and Everson. Thus, religious groups seek to abrogate freedom of art, speech, and the press. Reactionaries move to suppress labor. Communists to establish dictatorships, all in the name of freedom. Because of the peculiar definitions of freedom used by some of these camouflaged tyrants, it seems necessary to redefine freedom in the terms understood by Voltaire, Paine, Washington, Jefferson, and Emerson. So he's saying in order to even understand what the hell freedom is, because it's been given so much lip service, it's such a stupid meme, even back in 1946, that we need to like dig into the source texts and really return to what it means.
I did have some in my research. I noticed that Jefferson, in his writings, he uses both freedom and liberty, but he means different things when he uses those words. So he actually distinguished them in his writing. Freedom means to be free from something. So you're free from a dictator or somebody telling you what to do, or like if somebody kidnaps you and puts you in prison or a cage or something, you obviously, your freedom's being restricted. But liberty means that you are free to do something. So liberty has to do with actions, and freedom usually has to do with your actual environment and circumstances.
So it's almost like security.
Forced upon you.
Okay. And you're being like free from something.
You could be at liberty to do something else.
Got it.
It's really important to note that when Jefferson talks about freedom in his writings, he is not referring to the individual's freedom to do whatever they want, whenever they want.
Well, in the deck, it says that we're free to pursue our happiness.
Which is, yes, is within the bounds of the one person, which that means that as soon as I affect someone else negatively by my free choices, that's when it becomes problematic. That's why they use liberty too, because liberty takes into account that point, that your freedom could also infringe upon another person's freedoms. And that's where they draw the line of like, here's your rights, that's what liberty is you have the rights to move and do what you want, as long as they don't negatively affect somebody else.
This brings us to the titular line of the entire essay. Titular means that's like when they say the name of the movie in the movie. Yeah. And it's a cool word.
Sounds like tits.
Right? That's probably why it's cool. Just like
it's what everybody looks at.
It's just like the Jack in the Box logo. It's also tits.
Oh, I need to look at that.
It's side boob. Freedom is a two-edged sword, of which one edge is liberty and the other, responsibility. Both edges are exceedingly sharp, and the weapon is not suited to casual, cowardly, or treacherous hands. So he's saying that, yeah, freedom is not for everybody. It's just the people who are ready to wield that weapon.
Freedom ain't free, bitches.
Whoa, man, whoa. However useful, spectacular, or necessary our ideas and experiments may be, they still have little to do with absolute truth. Such a thing can only exist for the individual according to his whim or his inner perception of his own truth in being. So he's saying here that freedom is a thing, even though ideas are subjective, and that ideas gain their value inwardly to the individual.
This is a very individual concept.
Freedom isn't necessarily free, but it's also not entirely real. But it's real because it has a subjective value to us. Just because there's no way to like put freedom under a microscope doesn't mean that it's not real, at least to us, each of us individually as well. At this point, Parsons gets a little metaphysical, which I think he's certified to do. He says, whatever the universe is, we are either all or part of it by virtue of our consciousness, but we don't know which. We're connected to the universe no matter what. There's no taking the observer out of the equation. And we even talked about this a little bit in our physics episode. 2, no philosophy, scientific theory, religion, or system of thought can be absolute or infallible. They are only relative. One man's opinion is just as good as another's.
Yeah, and that could be like, I believe it's called social relativism, where each person is just relative to the other. So you can't prove something true or false.
Then we're on to his third thing here. There is no absolute justification for emphasizing one individual theory or way of life over another. Every man has the right to his own opinion and his own way of life. There is no system of human thought which can successfully refute this thesis. Whoa. Okay, yeah. What does that mean? There's nothing that's going to work besides living your own life. There's no one way that can be prescribed for everybody.
That's interesting too, because you brought up Babylon. Wasn't the Tower of Babel built like the original? It was like the original UN, like one world government, and they brought all the people there to build it as high up as they could to get into heaven, and then it fell.
Yeah, in the tarot, it's represented as the lightning-struck tower, Tarot 16.
It's too unbalanced to sustain itself, and it'll fall over, it'll topple and create. And in the story, I guess, all the people were banished to different countries, and that's why everyone speaks different languages. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that, like, you can try and get everyone on the same page, but I think it throws the universe out of balance, and eventually it'll deteriorate and start anew and make seeds to plant new towers. I guess you could call them towers. That's what I kind of like think about people's theories, beliefs, and, you know, anything that you're trying to understand truth is like a tower you're building up into heaven. But I don't think we should have one tower. I think we should have lots of different ones. I'm saying it's important for everybody to have their own tower, or you can join whatever tower you want, but shoving them all together is going to make it fall over because it's unstable in that state.
And the next card in the series, the Star, is related to that idea because the Star, at least in Thelema, which Jack was a subscriber of, the stars are in their each proper orbit, and that orbit could be called their true will. It's the path that they take and is unique to them.
It's their sphere of influence, which that's what he's trying to say is if you reach outside of that, it becomes a violation of other people's rights. So that's not liberty. Liberty is being in your sphere of influence like a star.
And this is where I come in and say, if we want to return to our principles, if we're going to be speaking as Americans, and we're going through this great crisis right now in this country, if we're going to return to our principles, that's not the church, and it's not Karl Marx. It is something deeper and more esoteric. It's something that is related to science. It's something that links us to the stars. It's like Elon Musk says, we are a nation of people that came here from somewhere else, some people that are looking for something more, people that are willing to take risks, and this nation is a distillation of the spirit of exploration. That's in our blood, is having our own sphere of influence and respecting the other people's sphere. Even if, like, the truth is like, we did some bad stuff when we came here. You know, maybe that's why we're always afraid of people coming here and doing bad stuff to us.
We were learning. We had never met other peoples like that. It's a state of learning, and you can't get stuck on shit like that because it's like once we learned that was, you know, probably not a good idea, you know, then you change the way that you interact with new peoples.
Right. And we should
in the future.
And we should do our best we probably should do our best to fix up Spaceship Earth on its own terms, but that's maybe a topic for another day. And also probably somewhere else in this essay. So he's talking about science right now. I don't think I introduced those 4 points very well, but he's starting to launch into metaphysics. And where he continues on this thread is, in spite of an inestimable value, is that the right way to say it? Inestimable value.
Inestimable.
Science is a tool and has nothing to do with ultimate truth. Herein is the danger of science. As a tool, it is so valuable, so useful, and so irresistible that we incline to regard it as an arbiter of the absolute, giving final and irrefutable pronouncement on all things. This is exactly the position that the pedant, the dogmatist, and the dialectical materialist would have us take. Then, posing as a scientist or propounding scientific doctrines, he can persuade us to accept his values and obey his orders. Today, science must forever be free to overthrow its yesterdays. Otherwise, it will degenerate into ancestor worship. Dun, dun, dun.
Which I would argue it is right now. It's already there now.
Robert Anton Wilson in Prometheus Rising has a scientific explanation for this, and it's because new information after the age of 35 seems to be like a threat.
Interesting.
And so in Prometheus Rising, Robert Anton Wilson says that it requires about one generation for the new discoveries to take hold because you literally need old people to die because they won't let the theories change.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's like how heliocentrism came about. think about the earliest Galileo and Copernicus and Newton. Like, all of these people turned everyone upside on their heads. They thought these guys were crazy. In Copernicus's case, it was labeled him a heretic, and the church was out to kill him basically for a while, because you couldn't upturn those ideas back then. But that's the whole point of liberty and freedom, is that you need people on the outliers to basically alert the main herd that, hey, that stuff that you're learning is actually wrong, and I found another way. If you don't have those people out there, then you're never going to figure out how to change what you're doing for the better.
You know what we do with those people, Mari?
Burn them at the stake.
Throw them off the edge of the world.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
It is necessary that we defend freedom unless we all wish to be slaves. It is expedient that we achieve brotherhood unless we desire destruction. And it is convenient that we grant others the right to their own opinions and lifestyles in order to maintain our own.
Nice.
We stand together apart or die apart together. That's how I surmise that.
Well, and that's really interesting that he's talking about that, because we're all the same consciousness, if you think about it. So if I violate your rights and your security, in effect, what I'm broadcasting to the universe is, it's all right if you violate my security, because I've already done it to somebody else. So I'm okay with that happening to me.
Yeah, through like Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative.
Mm-hmm.
So he lists some inalienable rights, and then he says, these rights must be counterbalanced by certain responsibilities. The liberal accepting them must guarantee these rights to all others at all times, regardless of his personal feelings or interests. He must work to establish and protect them, live in a manner commensurate with them, and be prepared to defend them with his life.
It just reminds me of the guy that defended the burning of the flag. He's like, I don't agree with what you're doing, but I will die to defend your right to do it.
Absolutely. He must refuse to compromise these principles on any issue for any reason. Nothing short of such a commitment will assure the survival of liberty or democracy of society itself. So what you just said is in alignment with that, which is like, I don't agree with you burning the flag, but I basically should be willing to give my life for you to have that freedom of expression.
Yeah, because they're not hurting another person. They're just desecrating a flag, which I don't want to make it sound like it's like no big deal. I mean, a lot of people died for that flag. So it's almost like you're burning their sacrifice. And so I could see how it's like super offensive. But as long as you didn't set fire to a building with people in it, or like a car with, then I think that's fine. That's not, if you're not like destroying other people's property and livelihood, you should be able to do it.
Yeah, you have a God-given right to worship Satan and burn American flags and
absolutely,
and listen to wet ass pussy at full volume. That's that's your God-given right. So then the next thing he says, it's actually probably not the next thing he says because we're abridging it. This is why we encourage you to go read the document yourself, but we're taking most of it. The intelligent individual will not base his conduct on an arbitrary or absolute concept of right and wrong. He's saying, like, you can't get smart people to just do something because you tell them it's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's also important for some people to not do it, because what if you told everyone the wrong thing to do? Everyone's dead. So it's really important to have people that are like, nah, I ain't doing that. What this is saying is you can't litigate these people or put them in jail for not doing what they're told to do if it's not harming someone else.
We're talking about reorganizing society on a higher level of complexity, which associates with things gaining more harmony and intelligence, doesn't it?
And then when we differentiated freedom and liberty, freedom has to do with just an individual's sphere, right? Just one person's freedom. But liberty brings into the equation all of the others around you in your society and in your group. So I would argue that liberty is like a higher octave or a higher expression of freedom, because you're taking into account everyone else around you when you make that decision.
So Jack's metaphysical perspectives bring the ego into focus next. The ego can be very broad. A man may include the whole world as part of his ego, and thus set out to redeem it or save it for no other reason than the pleasure of personal accomplishment. So, my philosophy teacher used to talk about this. He's like, if you need the whole world to be fixed or saved before you can be happy personally, that's a big ego problem.
Bill Gates. Excuse me, I had a frog in my throat.
Well, he has so much money. I mean, if anyone's going to do something, it might as well be him, right?
He has the liberty to do it,
we can
but he
trust
doesn't
him.
No, he's not even a doctor.
Yeah,
but he wants to save everybody.
No.
And it's like, oh my God, just make Microsoft work, please. Go back to what you're good at.
Wearing sweaters.
But yeah, that's what he's saying here is that, and fascists will do this all the time, is they'll come in and be like, oh, it's for the welfare of the people. And if you're not on my side, then you must just hate all the people and you're just a bad person. You want everyone to die. You're awful. So they deflect what they're doing by blaming it on the other that doesn't integrate with their ideas.
So then he says the enlightened liberal needs no such justification. He will realize and accept his inherent selfishness and the inherent selfishness of all men. He will understand living as a technique, the technique of getting what he wants on the terms he wants. Woo! Kind of satanic there, Jack. Sounds very Levian.
However, I like that he brings up terms, because terms are like, it's like the give and take in a relationship. Like you set out your boundaries of how you want to interact with other people, and they can either say yes or no. So the fascist is the one that's like, if you say no, they will use force against you or threaten you. Whereas a real liberal would be like, all right, I guess we just don't agree then. And then they'll go find other followers that are more on their page.
It has been said with justification that the Constitution means what the Supreme Court says it means. A document so fundamental as a Bill of Rights cannot be jeopardized by arbitrary interpretations. It should need no interpretations. I or a minority needs no recourse to elaborate lengthy and costly proceedings in order to protect these rights. It is the duty of the state to provide this recourse to all alike. So here he's saying, like, America's not perfect. Our checks and balances are not perfect. And there's a big problem, and that's the Constitution exists, and the Bill of Rights exists attached to it, the amendments, right? And then the Supreme Court gets to tell you what it means. And so right now, while this episode is being recorded, we just had a Supreme Court justice die. And so there's going to be this big, lengthy battle over who gets to be added to the seat to interpret our laws. Because this is a problem that Jack says is like, you got these people that get to tell you what this means. And when we have laws, it ought to just be clear.
Right, but the fact that it's written so long ago, I understand why people want to rewrite it, but here's all you got to do is learn history and get a dictionary. Then you can interpret it yourself. Like, if you understand the circumstances when it was written, the history of why it was written, and then if you can get a dictionary to understand the words and like in the context of the time period, then you could read all that yourself and interpret it. But it's up to our judges to do that. So
it sounds hard.
I know, but when anybody interprets something, you're going to have some kind of like personal bias attached to it. That's just human nature. That's why the person who is the judge is really important, because they have a personal nature about the way that they rule.
Are you ready to get into the future that liberals want?
You're sounding like alt-right here.
This is the future that liberals want, Mari.
The real liberals, the old school liberals, man.
What about the new school liberals that want to be dogs, Mari? What about them?
They're otherkin, and they don't vote or drive or have a job.
Just way to throw your people under the bus, Mari. Bow wow.
Oh, God. No, furry's filled with idiots.
This is the future that liberals want. It can only be ensured by the allegiance to the principle that man has certain inalienable rights, among which are the rights to live his private life insofar as it concerns only himself as he sees fit, to eat and drink, to dress, live, and travel as, where, and he will, to express himself, to speak, write, print, experiment, and otherwise create as he desires, to work as he chooses, when he chooses, and where he chooses, at a reasonable and commensurate wage, to purchase his food, shelter, a word we couldn't figure out the meaning of.
It's not a word on Google, at least.
And social needs and other services and commodities necessary to his existence and self-expression at a reasonable, commensurate price, to have a decent environment and upbringing during his childhood until he reaches a responsible majority, to love as he desires, where and how and whom he desires, in accordance only with the desires of himself and his partner, to the positive opportunity to enjoy these rights as he sees fit, without obstruction on the one hand or compulsion on the other. Finally, in order to protect his person, his property, and his rights, he should have the right to kill any aggressor if necessary. This is the purpose of the right to keep and bear arms. Woo! So Jack is saying you need guns to keep people off of you at the end of the day. How do you feel about that, Mari?
Oh yeah, I was talking without pushing the button. Sorry. So the reason that we have the right to bear arms is because guns are literally a tool to protect our freedom. I know that sounds cliche, and the fact that the technology changes over time has nothing to do with the fact that we have the right to possess that tool in order to protect our rights and property. So a lot of these people get up in arms about gun control and stuff. It is true. The Second Amendment has it says that the government has no right to limit your ability to get those tools to protect yourself and your estate. So even if the tool changes because technology changes, it's still a gun. It's still a tool. It's the same tool that they're talking about. They're not talking about musket rifles and powder ammunition. We've made improvements on them up until now, but we still have the right to own the technology as it is right now. The bullet ensures the ballot is what I should say. Right, but just because they make guns better and more effective and more deadly doesn't mean that we're all of a sudden not allowed to have them anymore.
Oh, I was agreeing.
Which is a lot
I'm saying,
of what,
it's there to ensure that we have a democracy in the first place.
People say, you don't need a higher capacity than 5 or 10 bullets in certain areas. I know in California it's crazy, your regulations, but why does the government have the right to tell me what I need, what I do need, and what I don't need?
Well, liberalism is a high capacity weapon in the first place. We are endowed with responsibilities, and we shouldn't be running out into the public sphere screaming, please take away my responsibilities. We collectively cannot handle them. That doesn't make any sense to me. And then you got these witches and wizards who believe that they have the power to create and take life with their spells, and they don't believe that people can be trusted with weaponry either. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. If you think you can curse someone to death and that everyone should have access to that knowledge, but you don't believe people should be trusted with deadly force, you're a bit of a hypocrite and your magic is fake.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who's been trained with firearms and understands how not to use them knows you don't just walk up to someone and shoot them in the face. Yeah. That's a violation of owning the gun in the first place.
They're going to take your guns if you do it.
Well, it's not even that. It's just that if you shoot someone else for no reason and they're not trying to aggress you, then you've violated your own freedom by taking their freedom. Right. So you become a criminal at that point. So anybody who doesn't exercise this right properly is a criminal.
Now, this next part is where you start running up to people and be like, I'm going to give you some freedom. And it also must be understood that we cannot force man's rights upon him. Man has the right to be a slave if he so desires. What? So some people are just going to be slaves.
And then some people want to do that.
That's their freedom.
Or some people don't have the aptitude or the necessary experience to understand what it is. So people that, like you said, the people that think that, oh, please take our rights away, it's too much for us to handle. It's like they should have that freedom, but it shouldn't extend to other people that know what they're doing and know how to handle their own responsibilities.
I agree with this point. Next. Freedom, like charity, begins at home. No man is worthy to fight in the cause of freedom unless he has conquered his internal drives. He must learn to control and discipline the disastrous passions that would lead him to folly and ruin. He must conquer inordinate vanity and anger, self-deception, fear, and inhibition. These are the crude ores of his being. He must smelt these ores into the fire of life, forge his own sword, temper it, and sharpen it against the hard abrasive of experience. Only then is he fit to bear arms in the larger battle. What?
That's hot. That's hot.
Ooh. So he's saying you have to meditate and work on yourself and stuff if you want to be free. You
have to train. Absolutely.
You have to be Jedi.
Yes. You have to take it into your own hands. But like, I love how that he mentions it charity, because charity is a personal thing that you do. And all these charitable organizations, and you know, you ever been to Target and you're like checking out and they're like, after they try to sell you their stupid credit card, they're like, oh, do you want to donate to blah, 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 with the round up your change or add $1? It's like, no, I don't.
I want to give money to boobs. I want to give money to boobs and testicles.
Well, then do it. The point is to do it yourself, of your own volition. So charity cannot be put into an organizational structure. So what these people are doing basically is offering you an option at checkout to be like, oh, I'm going to give to a charity. So they're taking away your they're taking your responsibility of doing it yourself, and they're saying, oh, we'll take care of that charity for you if you just give us some extra money. And then what they do
it's
is
not the same thing.
They take that and write it off on their taxes. They say, look at all this money we gave to charity and we don't have to pay taxes on it anymore. So they're taking that right away from you. So if you do give to charity every year and you do it out of your own pocket to like a church or like a homeless shelter or anything like that, you can get taxed back to your own pockets for that. But like these large corporations that are like touting charities and stuff and trying to take donations, they're using it as a way to make more profit. So they're tricking you by using the word charity, just like freedom can be used in that way. I just thought that was an interesting note to add.
The point of that whole section was also that one must be able to handle freedom to have freedom. Like, you can't just go completely crazy every time you get a chance. Or if you do, you have to be able to live your life. You have to...
Or handle the repercussions that come from what you've done in your freedom.
Yeah.
So if you do something really dumb and the police come, well, that's a product of your free choice to break the law.
Okay, so moving on. He may then find himself in a difficult predicament. If he should support the rights of the working man or minority and racial groups, he's a red. If at the same time he believes in constitutional government and individual rights, he is also a fascist. So he's saying they will call you a communist and they will call you a Nazi. Just be prepared. It's going to be one of the two.
A lot of name calling here to get you to think the same way as somebody else. It's all emotional bullshit. It has nothing to do with logic.
And we're seeing this more than ever today, where if you think one way, it's like, oh, you're racist. Or if you have another idea, oh, it's because you're a filthy communist.
Really, it's because somebody thinks differently. That's the real reason, you know? But you can't just, what they're doing is making an entire judgment off of one or two examples of the way that you think. And that is a violation. I mean, they can call you names, but as soon as they think that, oh, it's okay if I like punch you in the face because you don't agree with me, that is a violation of your personal freedom if somebody does that to you.
The difficulty lies in the confusion of rights of the individual in relation to the responsibilities of the state. It is a sad comment on our mentality that the social reformer subscribes to total regimentation, while the alleged individualist propagandizes for total irresponsibility. So that's like on that's like the two
Communists
extremes
versus anarchists.
Yeah.
Which is funny because you have anarcho-communism as well.
In the absence of a social devotion to the true principles of liberalism, positivists have usurped its name and even its phrases in order to propagandize for their various totalitarianisms. This process has been aided by the faction of pseudo-liberalism, which believes that all opinion contrary to its own must be suppressed. So,
asshole.
See, I'm afraid to. Hey,
no,
you
don't.
Can't say
you got to
that.
cut that out. I'm like, you can't say that on YouTube.
All right.
You should put that, put that clip in your fucking in the references in the description.
I will, just so people know what we're talking about.
Just slip it in there.
As I write, allegedly liberal groups are agitating for the denial of public forums to those they call fascists. Americanism societies are striving for the suppression of communism or red literature and speech. So he's saying that both sides are trying to suppress the other side.
Well, they will. In their extreme forms, they will always try to express their opposers. which is why mysticism and spirituality is so important, because it allows you to elevate beyond black and white and the red pill and the blue pill, and to see actually how they're gaming your mind, because this is all a game.
This is the stuff we need to be looking back towards, and it's not even that far back. This is a good distillation of principles that were from the former aeon and rephrased in a way for the new one. Some of these ideas almost sound patrist or paternal now, but at his time, these were exceedingly feminist and liberal.
It allowed for feminism and even the women's suffrage to happen. These writings allowed for civil rights.
Now, if you're going to talk about Ariana Grande and cursing the president and using magic to propel a progressive new direction, this is what he was all about. The Babylon working was an attempt to unleash these principles on the world. And it was shortly after that we found the Nag Hammadi library and all of those great Gnostic gospels. So it's all kind of connected. Let's continue. It would seem that all these organizations are devoted to one common purpose: the suppression of freedom. Their sincerity is no excuse. History is a bloody testament that sincerity can achieve atrocities which cynicism could hardly conceive of. Each of these groups is engaged in a frantic struggle to sell out, betray, or destroy the freedom which was their birthright, and which alone assured their present existence.
Wow. Clap, 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 slow clap.
Freedom is a two-edged sword. He who believes that the absolute rightness of his belief is an authority to suppress the rights and opinions of his fellows cannot be a liberal.
Yeah, we got a lot of fake ones around.
A generation went down in blood and agony to make the world safe, but the evil that makes the world unsafe still goes undefeated, plotting new sacrifices of misery and blood. The guilt lies not entirely with the warmongers, plutocrats, and demagogues. If a people permit exploitation and regimentation in any name, they deserve their slavery. A tyrant does not make his tyranny. It is made possible by his people and not otherwise.
Yeah, and that's the trick that they use. They try to make you feel like the people have no power or that we're not being listened to. And that's a good way to get somebody on your side, because actually they do listen to you and they do work for us. You know, if we don't like what a tyrant is doing, we all as a collective have a power to go in and remove him forcibly. For some reason, we don't do that, though. We're like, oh, I wish the politicians would do something about that, you know, and we continue to vote for those same politicians. That's what they're trying to say here is if you can mislead a group of people, then you're free to do that, because they have no other will except for the one that you've programmed into them. So it's imperative for everybody to express and exercise their own personal liberties to keep this from happening.
Okay, so to go along with that thought, much of our modern thought is characterized by pretenses and evasions, by appeals to ultimate authorities which are non-liberal, superstitious, and reactionary. Often we are not aware of these thought processes. We accept ideas, authorities, catchphrases, and conditions without troubling to think or investigate, and yet these things may conceal terrible traps. Watch out, it's a trap!
I mean, that's how bills are written too in the legislature. They'll like slip stuff in and put like the Patriot Act. That sounds so nice, right? But that's what allowed the NSA to read all of our phone logs and record all of our telephone calls and without our knowledge.
I have nothing to add or take away from that. We have lost our freedom through tolerance and inertia. No true civilization is possible without this liberty, and no state, national or international, is stable in its absence. The proper relation between individual liberty on the one hand and social responsibility on the other is the balance which will assure a stable society. I don't want to be like, so yeah, I'm saying if you care about America and it does bother you to see the left and the right just viciously ready to just dash the whole thing against the rocks to reestablish something in their own image, this is the sort of stuff we need to be spreading far and wide. I want to get all like crazy and soapboxy about it, but let's get real, dude. This guy was written out of history because he was a Thelemite. Jack Parsons is the guy who strapped rockets to airplanes, and that's why we have jets. He was in communication with Nazi rocket scientists, and they were like, oh, let me teach you all the things I know, but first you shall teach me what you know, Mr. Jack. And then Jack would tell him some crazy shit, and they'd be like, oh yes, here's something that you already know. And he'd be like, what the hell? Like, he knew more science than these Nazi scientists. He's the reason America got to the moon first. He's the reason we have Top Gun. And if you don't know about this guy, please go listen to our other episodes, look him up. He's the guy who founded JPL, and he's an all-around American dude. He used to blow up stuff with his friend in the backyard, and that's how he ended up working for JPL and founding it. And I mean, you just go listen to the podcast. It's good stuff, man. So my point is that America is not founded on Marxism. America's not founded on the church or the Bible. It's founded on these esoteric principles. It's founded on this witchy shit. And if you'd like to hear more about this witchy shit, specifically the part that goes really deep into sex, well, sorry folks, but you gotta pay me $5 to get the extended show. How are you going to do that? Well, you're going to go on over to www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where $5 is going to get you all our extended shows, the bonus artwork, and access to our Discord server, where you can hang out with us, swap music, and play Minecraft. We talk all about the witchy weird stuff on the show. It can get kind of strange, so if you can't handle strange people or weird ideas, maybe don't do that part, but you are perfectly welcome to contribute financially